At 8:23 local time, a Russian rescue vessel was sitting 15 miles off the coast, acting like the naval version of a battlefield medic. Clean, harmless, and supposedly there to help. But this ship wasn't helping anyone. It was spying. Inside the control room, operators watched their screens like predators, because this rescue ship was actually conducting covert electronic surveillance, quietly harvesting Ukrainian signals in the Black Sea. And then, it happened. A sudden anomaly. 3 heat signatures, broken, disjointed, flickering in and out like ghosts, bobbing just 10 meters above violent winter water, racing at roughly 110 miles per hour, and heading straight toward them. If you want more breakdowns like this, subscribe, because what happens next is a masterclass in deception. From the outside, this vessel looked innocent. A Project MPSV-07 rescue ship, the kind of platform that should be towing damaged boats, pulling sailors from the sea, responding to emergencies. That image wasn't a coincidence, because in war, the best camouflage isn't paint, it's plausibility, and this ship had it. But beneath the rescue branding was a completely different mission: electronic intelligence, intercepting communications, tracking patterns, building a picture of Ukraine's drone war, launch after launch, week after week. Its most important asset wasn't a crane or a medical bay. It was the ship's advanced antenna systems, especially an R381T array, a signal vacuum designed to scoop up transmissions across huge distances. Imagine a massive invisible net pulling in radio traffic, control signals, coordination chatter, anything Ukraine needed to move drones through the Black Sea. And the ship wasn't just listening, it was logging every launch pattern, every rhythm, every repeated habit. Because once you can predict the pattern, you don't have to fight the drone in the air. You hit it before it takes off. You strike the launch site minutes after the drones leave. You pre-position defenses in the corridor the drones always use. You don't react to Ukraine's deep strikes, you preempt them. And according to Ukrainian intelligence, that's exactly what was happening. And when Ukraine finally confirmed it, a nightmare snapped into focus. Russia was only days away from being able to cripple Ukraine's deep strike campaign in the Black Sea. So Ukraine made a decision that wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. They weren't going to let Moscow finish that database. They were going to erase it. Those 3 flickering signatures on the Russian screen, they weren't birds. They weren't noise. They were the opening move. Ukraine sent 3 FP-1 deep strike variants, not throwaway FPVs, not cheap kamikaze toys. These were purpose-built to slip through modern detection and hit something expensive. Each carried around 20 kilograms of high explosive. And the target wasn't the hull. The target was the ship's brain, the sensors, the arrays, the surveillance core, the systems that made it a floating intelligence weapon. Now here's where Ukraine got clever. These drones weren't designed like typical aircraft. They used specialized plywood airframes, engineered to create a radar signature so small it could be confused with almost nothing at all. Radar systems are built to track certain types of returns, especially the kind you get from aluminum aircraft. These FP ones, they were built to be phantoms. Small radar cross-section, low altitude, hard to hold, hard to confirm. But radar wasn't the only threat. Russia also had eyes in the sky, and right on cue, over the horizon came a Russian 4-post reconnaissance drone flying a clean, repetitive racetrack pattern about 30 kilometers off the Ukrainian coast. This wasn't a shooter, this was a spotter. Equipped with a high-end camera system and thermal sensors designed to detect tiny differences in heat, good enough to catch something small moving over open water. And for a moment, it worked. The lead FP-1 blipped onto the 4-post operator's display, then another, 3 contacts, low altitude, heading east. But the operator couldn't keep them all at once. The sea below was chaos. Whitecaps, spray, clutter, broken reflections. And the second the FP-1s detected the 4-post overhead, their pre-programmed response triggered instantly. They didn't climb. They didn't sprint. They did the one thing that turns high-tech sensors into guesswork. They dropped down to mere meters above the water, skimming so low they practically merged with the sea's surface. In radar terms, they disappeared into ground clutter, the noisy mosaic of echoes created by violent water. And then, the plywood advantage kicked in again, because wood cools rapidly in frigid air. Over winter water, those airframes matched the sea surface temperature fast enough to smudge thermal contrast. So on the four-post feed, the contacts didn't look like drones. They looked like anomalies, noise, birds, sea clutter, and the operator did what humans do when the data isn't clean. He dismissed it, logged it as possible feedback noise, and resumed his patrol, unaware he had just cleared Ukraine's strike drones through one of the most dangerous surveillance layers in the region. But the FP-1s weren't out of danger, not even close, because Russia had already used the spy ship's intelligence for something else. Earlier that morning, Russia had pinpointed Ukraine's drone launch site, and it struck. 2 Shahed-style drones hit the area minutes after the FP-1s cleared it, 50-kilogram warheads turning equipment into flaming wreckage. Ukrainian operators barely escaped. And suddenly, the FP-1s out over the sea had a new problem. They were flying with limited support. No comfortable local comms. No easy override control. Limited ability to adapt if Russia intervened unexpectedly. So command faced the worst kind of choice: abort, let the drones ditch into the sea, and keep the spy ship alive. Or commit harder, risk more assets, and finish the mission. Because if the ship survived with its data, Ukraine's deep strike campaign could be paralyzed within days. Then Ukraine caught a break. Intercepted Russian radio chatter confirmed Moscow believed the FP-1s had also been destroyed in the launch site strike. That assumption created a window. If Russia thought the threat was already dead, they'd react slower. Ukraine chose decisiveness, and then the real deception began. At 8:41, Ukraine launched 20 naval drones towards Sevastopol, and Russian radar operators froze, because this looked like the largest naval drone assault of the war, 20 targets converging on a major base. Russian doctrine demanded one thing: respond to what you can see. So they did. 6 K-27 helicopters launched from Novorossiysk, sprinting west at high speed. Russia's primary defense against naval drones, capable of dropping weapons meant to neutralize threats at sea. And here's the key: every minute those helicopters flew west was another minute Ukraine's real strike drones flew east with less pressure. Because those 20 naval drones, they weren't real attack craft. They were decoys, modified jet skis and cheap commercial boats, built to mimic the radar signature of real Ukrainian naval drones just enough to force Russia's hand. Ukraine wasn't trying to win with the decoys. Ukraine was trying to pull Russian air cover away from the spy ship. And it worked. Suddenly, the spy ship was out there with no helicopter umbrella, no quick reaction force, no fast airborne shield. But Russia still had one last layer, waiting right in the kill zone. Circling within about 5 kilometers of the spy ship were 2 Project 03160 Raptor patrol boats, fast escorts with machine guns and direct integration into the ship's radar coverage. After losing major assets earlier in the war, Russia didn't leave high-value ships alone anymore, so now the FP-1s had to do the impossible: slip past patrol boats built to detect tiny targets, survive machine gun fire, hit a precise point on the superstructure, and do it mostly on autopilot. 3 drones versus 2 Raptors, and only one needed to get through. At 9:09, Raptor 1's radar link caught a glimpse, about 15 kilometers out. Contact, then nothing, then contact again. Intermittent returns, erratic, unstable. The plywood and sea-skimming flight confused the algorithms just enough to make it hard to lock, but Raptor 1 didn't hesitate. It accelerated to intercept. The gunner loaded a fresh belt, standard drill, engage close, walk tracers onto target, fire until splashdown. At roughly 500 meters, visual contact snapped in. They opened fire immediately. Tracers stitched the air. Rounds landed hits. A propeller blade sheared. The engine shuddered. The drone kept going, barely. Then it splashed into the Black Sea. Drone number 1, down. Seconds later, Raptor 2 called in. It had another FP-1 in sight and commenced firing. Raptor 1 swung to assist. 2 patrol boats coordinated fire. Metal rain. Drone number 2 took direct hits and splashed down too. And on the spy ship, that looked like victory. 2 threats eliminated. The defense worked. But here's the brutal irony. It worked perfectly for Ukraine. Because while Russia was busy killing drones number 1 and number 2, drone number 3 was doing something else. Drone number 3 had swung out on a wider path, staying out of the forced engagement zone. It wasn't trying to brute force through the Raptors. It was circling around the firefight, and as the Raptors committed their attention, their guns, and their position to the first two drones, drone number 3 quietly cleared their defensive ring. Then, through the morning haze, it appeared. Low, fast, locked in. It was skimming at roughly 5 meters altitude, accelerating into terminal run. Now Russia had a problem. Engage too aggressively near the ship, and you risk friendly fire, hitting your own high-value vessel in the chaos. That hesitation was everything. At 300 meters, it was too close. At 200, there was no time. At 100, it was already over. At 9:14, drone number 3 slammed its 20-kilogram warhead into the superstructure, right where the ship's intelligence systems lived. The explosion didn't just damage the ship, it erased its purpose. Critical arrays, gone. Radar coverage, twisted into scrap. Secondary blasts ripped through power conduits. Fuel lines ignited. Electrical fires crawled across the structure. In seconds, the vessel went blind, then deaf, then silent. Weeks of intelligence collection, slag, and fire. Tens of millions in hardware, gone. And most importantly, Russia's ability to predict Ukrainian operations in the Black Sea, gone in a flash. With the spy ship neutralized, Ukraine shifted launch sites and patterns. Russia fired follow-up strikes where it expected the next drones to come from, and hit emptiness. Because the predictive advantage Moscow was building had been reset back to zero. And when the smoke cleared, one truth was obvious. This wasn't just a tactical win. It was a strategic reset. Russia tried to win the drone war with surveillance. Ukraine answered with deception. And in one strike, one plywood phantom, Russia's Black Sea intelligence web lost its center. Stay prepared, stay informed. Subscribe for more.